Hi, and welcome to part 3 of the Conveyor Quick Tours. In this video, I'm going to take you through how to create a connection and build a simple mapping using the example of loading some contact data and connecting it to an account in Salesforce. So we find the green button down on the bottom left here to create the connection, and we select our target and source systems. Now you can choose from many different sources and targets, but in this instance, we're going to select Google Drive, where I already have a Google Sheet with a file of data in it, and I'm going to connect that into Salesforce. So after clicking Apply, we need to authenticate the credentials for both the source and the target. So we select existing or we add new. We've already got some credentials in here for Google, so I'm going to use those and click Apply. We're using Google Drive, so we need to define the data file we're using and the collection method. So we're just going to use the contact data file and the collection method. I can select to import all of the data each time the connection is activated, or just the new rows added to the file since the last run. I'm going to select all rows. Now we authenticate credentials for the target, in this case, Salesforce. Depending on the system you're using, you may have other settings to complete. As we're using Salesforce, you can select to use the bulk API, which is recommended most of the time as it's a more efficient way to use the API, and you can also control the batch size here as well. So now we've authenticated both the source and the target, we just need to give our connection a name and a description, where it sits in a folder, and any tags that can be used for searching. How long we want to store the historical logs on successes and failures for, and the maximum number of records processed in any given run. So let's call this simply contact load. Of course, having a great naming convention will really help you in the future when you've got lots and lots of connections within Conveyor. And let's put a tag in here for contacts and load and Salesforce. And let's create our connection. On the next screen, you can either choose to do the mapping now or do the mapping later. Of course, in this example, we're going to do the mapping now. The mapping really consists of sections, section actions, field mappings, error management, section and field conditions, variables and transformations, and the sections relate to different objects within your target. Now, don't worry about all of those things I've just said. I'll take you through the basics now, and then in subsequent videos, you'll get to see more on all of those different features. Now, in our example, we're loading contact data and attaching the contacts to the relevant pre-existing account records. So the first thing I want to do is actually to find the account records in Salesforce and bring back the record ID. That allows us to use this as a reference for our contact when we create it. So we select account from the section list and we add that into the mapping. And from the section action, we're going to use find existing record. Now there are a few different options in here. You can either just create a new record every time, find an existing record and bring back all of the different fields available within that record, update an existing, update or create, or even delete records. But we're finding existing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say where the account name in our target equals from our source the company column in our data file. Remember, it's a Google spreadsheet, so you would expect that to be organized into rows and columns. What shows in here is going to be the column headers that we see within our spreadsheet in this example. Then here we can choose what we want to do when we find that record. If there's multiple, what do we do with it? We can have lots of different options here for which one we pick to use in conveyor, or we can just treat as error. In this case, if we find multiple, I'm going to treat as error. Then over on the right here, what do we do in the case of that error? Do we stop the whole connection running? Do we just skip over this section and complete running this, complete the running of this row of data? Or do we skip this whole source item and continue with the connection and the run of this connection? Or do we skip this section and continue and actually ignore the error? If we use one of these ignore error options, it won't show up as an error in our error logging and therefore in our notifications. So we can choose what we want to do. And if we expect there's going to be errors and we're fine with that, we may want to choose to ignore the error and it will just skip over it and continue, and you won't get lots of error notifications. In this example, I'm going to stop processing completely. Errors will be logged and form part of your notifications, which we will cover in a subsequent video. Just to let you know, we can also use more advanced features such as conditions, variables, and transformations to ensure errors do not occur on many different scenarios, such as blank or incorrectly formatted field data, for example. Again, we'll cover those in subsequent videos. When you're finding an existing record, you can actually return any fields from that object for use in other mapping sections. So I can select here the fields that I want to return in that find, or just add everything, and then I can see everything that I've got access to. But for now, all we need is the account ID. Having a find action is all we need to do here, and Conveyor will automatically bring back the ID and make it available to us. So the next thing we need to do is add a section for the contact. So I will type in contact here and it will present to us the results for that search. So I can select contact and add that section. You can actually move the order of the sections around by drag and drop, and that can sometimes be important when you want to do things in certain order and create conditions and actions based on what happened in previous sections. So in this example, we're finding the account first, and then in our contact, we're going to create a new contact or update one if we find it. So what we're going to use is where our target email equals the email address from our source field, source file, sorry. And then if multiple, again, we have these options again, but rather than error, I'm just going to use all. So what this means is our different rows relate to our different rows in our source file relate to different contact records. For each row, I'm going to try and update an existing, or if one doesn't exist, I'm going to create a new one. How does it know if there's an existing? Well, it tries to match it based on the email address. If it actually matched to multiple records in Salesforce with that email address, I can actually just update all of them. We can now use the green button to map our fields, but Conveyor can actually speed this up by clicking on the three dots here and using auto match. So by using auto match within Conveyor, it will match all of the fields within the source data file to the relevant fields in the target object. So as you can see here now, it's added all of the relevant fields from my source file and selected the relevant target fields. Now, Conveyor will give you what it thinks is the best fit, but you should, of course, double check the mapping if you're using the auto match. So, is this it? No, it's not quite. So, the last thing we need to do is ensure the contact can be linked to the account that we found earlier in the mapping. So, to do this, we click to add a new field. and we're going to find we're going to select from here. We're not using a source field. We're going to use a previous section, and we're going to use account ID, and we're going to make that map to our account ID reference. Now I'm going to select this toggle here because I want to insert that reference at the top of my mapping list for my contacts. I'm going to hit apply, and you will see that appear within our field mapping under the contact section. Here it is here at the top. Now you can actually use these drag and drop buttons here to move your field mappings around. And really this is the process that you go through for mapping: adding sections, adding actions for those sections, adding fields, and error management. In subsequent videos, we'll go into more detail on the features I mentioned earlier: transformations, variables, and conditions, and we'll look at more complex connections and use cases. Finally, there are a number of features to be aware of in the mapping area. If you try and save a invalid mapping, you will get a red error box that pops up in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen telling you which field in which section needs your attention. If your schema changes in either your source or target systems, so let's say you have a need to add a new field to your target system to make a field available through the API, or make a field available through the API, sorry, you can click Refresh Schema up here in the top right-hand corner to make those changes available in your mapping. Toggling to see the target API names really helps where your field labels may be different to the fields that you're looking for, and you're more familiar with the API names rather than the field labels. You can copy the field mappings as well. So if you want to quickly repeat them, and that's helpful for an example, for example, you are building more complex mappings with conditions and transformations, doing different things with the same fields. In the next two sessions, we'll go through how you activate and run these connections and set up your success and failure notifications. So that gives you a quick introduction into setting up a connector and starting your mapping process. Thank you for watching. See you on the next video.